Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Monday Night Raw review for December 10th, 2018. And unfortunately, I didn't get to see Raw while it was airing on Monday, so I ended up DVRing it. And I just finished watching it a few minutes ago. And this was Raw's go-home show for TLC, for Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, which is this Sunday. And this Raw was from the Valley View Casino Center in San Diego, California. And before I start the review, if you guys haven't checked out my previous video that I uploaded last night, I reviewed Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So definitely check out my review of that if you haven't seen it. Really loved the film, really enjoyed it. It's a very fun film. So definitely go check out my review of that if you haven't seen it. So now on to the Raw review. So what I think of Raw this week? Well, I gotta say it was better than the past 2 weeks. Which first week it was very shitty Raw. One of the worst Raws that I've ever seen, like two weeks ago. And last week's was even bad as 2 weeks ago, where you had Dean Ambrose coming out looking like Bane wearing the gas mask. So and then this week, like I said, it wasn't as bad as the past 2 weeks, as Raw, as the Raws were the past 2 weeks, and still it wasn't. It wasn't that good of a show this week. So, but overall, let's get on with the review. So the show opened up with Seth Rollins in the ring, and his music was playing, and it kept on saying, "Burn it down, burn it down." Really liked that, and it was pretty cool. And so he was in the ring saying, "Burn it down" is going to be his rallying cry Sunday at TLC when he faces Dean Ambrose for the Intercontinental Championship. And he says he's out to spit some truth. And he says Corbin has been talking about, being on the right side of history. He ends up calling out Corbin. So Corbin ends up coming out, says to Seth, if they want to have a convo, they should do it in private. And Seth ends up standing up to Corbin, telling him to cut the crap. And, tells Corbin to shut up and listen to what he has to say. So he says to Corbin that Raw has sucked because of him, because of him in charge. Because Corbin comes out every single week and makes everything about him. He ends up saying, what has he been doing as as elect general manager is wrong. And so Corbin says he is allowing Seth to vent, and he better watch how Seth speaks to him. And so Seth says the roster in the back is the most talented men and women that Raw has seen. And Corbin doesn't know what to do with them. And so he ends up bringing up the Revival, saying that the Revival should be competing for the Raw Tag Team Championships. And Corbin puts them in Lucha House Rules matches, which are pointless. They just end up burying the Revival. They end up burying the Revival with these matches. And Seth says if Corbin fires everyone, it might as well be Corbin, Lashley, and McIntyre patting each other on the back for 3 hours. And he's like, oh, that's really going to send the ratings through the roof. So they make fun of the ratings that Raw has been getting. And Raw has been getting all-time low ratings. I think this is the 5th week that Raw has seen low ratings. I think last week they got like a 1.61, and this week This week's edition of Raw got a 1.58 rating. So they beat out their, so this week's Raw beat out their rating that they got last week, which is pretty fucking bad. At an all-time low with this show. And I can see them when Christmas comes, because WWE is putting Raw on Christmas Eve and New Year's, and they're not going to be live, they're going to be taped. And I wouldn't be surprised if on both Christmas or New Year's that Raw will receive maybe about like a 1.1, 1.0 rating. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. So will it happen? Maybe. But who knows? And Seth also makes fun of, he's like, oh yeah, let's have more, pissing segments, urinating segments. Bringing up reference to when Drake Maverick ended up pissing on Bobby Roode's robe, which happened 2 weeks ago on one of the worst Monday Night Raws that I ever seen. And Seth says to Corbin that every single decision he's made is to mask his insecurities. And he ends up saying to Corbin, if Strowman hurt his feelings so bad that Corbin had to hand the Universal Championship back to Brock Lesnar, a guy who shows up when he wants to, and he ends up telling Corbin, Brock Lesnar never wants to show up. And Seth says to Corbin that, when was the last time Brock Lesnar competed in a match on Raw? And Seth says to Corbin that Lesnar hasn't competed on Raw in 16 years. Since 2002 was the last time we saw Lesnar compete in a match on Monday Night Raw. So, and Seth says Corbin's experiment has been an objective failure because, of talent support, the fan support, and the TV ratings are at an all-time low because of Baron Corbin. And Corbin says he appreciates Seth's feedback, but this is where, to me, Vince McMahon wrote all this to say, to give Baron Corbin to say this. I can tell you, this is what Vince is thinking in his head. So this is what Corbin says. Corbin says, he doesn't care what he thinks or what the locker room thinks or what the people thinks. So I can tell this straight up was written by Vince McMahon to let Baron Corbin go out there and say that, which proves Vince doesn't give a shit about the talent in the back. He doesn't give a shit about the fans, and he doesn't give a shit about the TV ratings. And people are saying, people say, oh, the ratings, they don't count. Yes, ratings do count. It brings in revenue for your shows. So yeah, so it proves that Vince doesn't even give a shit about the fans, about the talent, and the ratings. Proves that Vince and WWE, they don't care, and they don't want to change or make the product better. So then Corbin says he appreciates Seth's feedback, and he went on to say that. And he says he's going to be in charge for a long time. And if Seth thinks it's bad now, it's going to get worse for Seth, as what Baron Corbin has said. And so Corbin says to Seth that Ambrose is going to beat him for the Intercontinental Championship on Sunday. and he's going to beat Strowman in a TLC match by forfeit and become permanent general manager of Monday Night Raw. And Corbin says after he wins, JoJo is going to stand up and announce him as permanent GM of Raw. And the very next night, which is going to be on Monday Night Raw, he's going to put Seth through hell. And so Seth goes, "Oh, why wait until next week?" He basically ends up telling Corbin to put him through hell tonight, so he can ask. So he asks Corbin if he wants to go one-on-one with him tonight. And Seth is like, "Oh, why don't we have a TLC match?" And so Corbin says no. So Seth ends up calling Corbin a coward. He keeps calling him a coward until Corbin is at his breaking point. So Corbin then ended up accepting for the match to go forward, and he makes a twist for the match. He says that in the TLC match, the Intercontinental Championship will be on the line. So I'm like, that's pointless, because Seth has a match with Dean Ambrose at TLC on Sunday for the Intercontinental Championship. So why put the Intercontinental title on the line tonight, in this TLC match on Raw? Sorry about that, but I was saying, it's pointless, to have the Intercontinental Championship on the line, with Seth Rollins and Baron Corbin. But this segment to me, it was like WWE was mocking its fans, and Vince and Baron Corbin, writing, Vince McMahon writing all that stuff that he probably came up with in his head to go out, and tell Baron Corbin to say that. So, but to me, it was meh segment. And somehow people end up liking this segment. But to me, it was meh. It was just WWE mocking its fans. So then we had Seth Rollins. He was getting interviewed about if he regrets calling out Baron Corbin. Seth says no, he doesn't regret calling out Baron Corbin. He says it may not have been the smartest move, but truth is he's not letting Corbin get away with it. And he takes a stand. Sorry about that again, but I was saying, Seth was saying, he's not letting Corbin get away with it, and he's taking a stand. And if he can, and he says, he doesn't deserve to hold the Intercontinental Championship. So that was that little interview with Seth Rollins. Then we had Bobby Roode and Chad Gable versus AOP and Drake Maverick. 2-on-3 handicap match for the Raw Tag Team Championships. This match was meh. Wasn't that great of a match. Drake Maverick was pussy in this match and didn't want to take any punches. So Bobby Roode and Chad Gable end up winning the match. Bobby Roode ended up rolling up Drake Maverick. And so Bobby Roode and Chad Gable are the new Raw Tag Team Champions. I'm like, not surprised by that. Wasn't surprised. For an overall meh match. Then we had Chad Gable and Bobby Roode. They were being interviewed by Charlie Caruso on them winning the titles and how they managed it. Roode says there hasn't been any hope on Raw lately. But him and Chad said, if they put in the work every week, they would be staying here. They would be standing here, the Raw Tag Team Champions. And Chad says only one word that comes to mind to describe how he feels, and that is glorious. So that little interview with Chad Gable and Bobby Roode. But like I said, not surprised that they won the Raw Tag Team Championships. So. Then you had Natalya in the ring. She was on the mic, and she says she has something to get off her chest about Ruby Riott. And Natty says, you know, she loves this business, and Ruby doesn't respect a person or thing in the business. And that Ruby made it personal when she destroyed Natalya's father's, Jim the Anvil Neidhart's sunglasses, which which possibly weren't the real sunglasses that he wore. And she also said Ruby tried to destroy her dad's legacy. So Natalya says to Ruby that she had to overcome so much to make it to WWE. And she mentions to Ruby, oh, do you remember the Montreal screw job? Do you remember when her Uncle Brett punched Vince? And she's talking about Montreal screw job. Brett didn't even punch Vince. Brett just spit it on Vince. She was talking about the Montreal, what happened at the end of the Montreal screw job. Sorry about that again. I keep on being interrupted. But back to what I was saying. Natalya talked about the Montreal screw job, and if Ruby remembered, when her uncle Bret Hart, punched Vince, which like I said, if she's talking about the Montreal screw job, Bret didn't even punch Vince. Bret just spit it on Vince after the match. So, but Natalya says she is damn proud to be a Hart and represent her family in WWE. And she says at TLC she is going to teach Ruby respect and dedicate her match to her father, who is Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And she says she's going to take everything she has and she's going to drive Ruby through a table. And so out comes the Riot Squad. They came out with a table, which Sarah Logan and Liv Morgan were carrying. And Ruby says to Natalya that all she does is walk around the locker room, feeling sorry about herself. And that Natalya doesn't need respect. And to get a good counselor. Ruby ends up saying Natalya disgraces her family. And Ruby says that she has a gift for Natalya. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. And so Ruby ends up pulling off the sheet, which we didn't know what it was, but we obviously knew it was a table. But she pulls it off, and it's revealed that on the table it's a picture of Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Natty's father. It's a picture put on the table. And Ruby says this Sunday at TLC, Natalya and her dad are going to be closer than ever. And that's how the other segment ended. But it's kind of like disrespectful that WWE has to do the storyline and bring in Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart's passing. So to me it's disrespectful. So then we had Dolph Ziggler end up cutting a promo saying last week he beat Drew McIntyre, and he adds him to the people who took him for granted. He says he plucked McIntyre from obscurity, and Dolph says he doesn't need help from Balor, and McIntyre shouldn't have pretended that Dolph was Finn Balor. So that was a little promo that Dolph ended up cutting. Then we got Charlie Caruso interviewing Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre made his way to the ring. and Charlie Caruso was there interviewing him in the ring. And, she was asking about why, he's challenging Dolph to a rematch tonight. So I was saying, sorry about that again, but, I was saying Charlie Caruso interviewed Drew McIntyre about, why is he challenging Dolph to a rematch again. And McIntyre says, nobody stays undefeated for long, forever. He goes on to mention, Andre the Giant and, Drew Mac himself even. And he says he beat Finn Balor so bad that, that Balor wasn't there. He goes on to say at TLC, he's going to finish him for good. And he says he is making Raw a better place for everybody and that everyone will respect him. And he says Dolph is the guy who's going to get his head kicked off. And so then we had the match, Drew McIntyre versus Dolph Ziggler rematch. It wasn't that great of a match, in my opinion. Just Drew McIntyre ended up winning the match. Ended up hitting a Claymore kick to Dolph. So there you go. It wasn't, that great. We just saw them have a match last week. So then we had after the match, Drew McIntyre drives Dolph into the post, and he's beating up on Dolph. Officials came from the back to separate McIntyre from Dolph. And then we see McIntyre end up hitting another Claymore kick, knocking Dolph into the LED board outside. How it has the LED board on the as the superstars make their way to the ring. And pretty much that was basically what happened. Then we had Bayley versus Alicia Fox. I mean, who cared? Who cared about this match? Bayley ended up winning with a Bayley to belly on Alicia Fox. You had Apollo Crews come out and take out the Singh brothers and Jinder Mahal. You also had Sasha Banks out there. Of course, by Bayley's side. So yeah, but Bayley ended up winning with a Bayley to belly on Alicia. Nothing special happened in the match. Then we had Charlie Caruso ends up interviewing Dean Ambrose. Ambrose ends up telling Caruso to never call him the Lunatic Fringe again. And Dean says the Architect is the name Seth gave himself to keep the spotlight on him. And he says Seth is a madman and can't think. And he says the only reason Seth ran out and put himself in a TLC match with Baron Corbin is because of his ego. And he says if Seth is still Intercontinental Champion, then Sunday he takes the title. And he's going to tell what he thinks of him, what he thinks of Seth to his face. And Caruso ends up telling him if Roman was aware of Dean and Seth, how would he react? And so Dean says, Roman? Who cares? And then, we had a video package, with, when Roman was there, and then how, Dean ended up stabbing Seth in the back. The video package, of course, it showed Dean Ambrose when he burned the Shield vest. And, what happened last week when he wore the gas mask, looking like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. So that was that. Then we had Elias was out there. He was saying, Bobby Lashley did an interview, and he said he would take every sport team. This is what he said. What Lashley said. He said Lashley would take every sport team in San Diego and move it to a cool city, or as Elias said, a cool city like LA. Because when Elias mentioned that, what Bobby said, what Lashley said, he's like a cool city like LA. And he says Lashley doesn't know if it was up to San Diego, they wouldn't let a loser like him perform. Now Elias says, he's been a good guy, but hitting children with his guitar is not on his list, making reference to Lio Rush. And he's like, last week was an exception. I'm sorry, guys. I keep getting interrupted. But like I was saying, Elias was saying, last week was an exception when he made reference to, hitting children with his guitar. I mean, he was making a reference to Lio Rush. And he says tonight he has a match with Lio, and he's got to teach him a lesson. And so then we had the match, Lio Rush versus Elias. Wasn't a good match. It was pretty boring ass match. Lio Rush ended up getting the win, and for this match, Heath Slater was the referee for this match. If you remember last week, Baron Corbin put Heath Slater and Rhino in a match. Whoever won the match gets to keep the job. The other, leaves Raw. And, Heath Slater end up winning the match. So, yeah, it looked like in this match, Heath Slater, didn't know how to be like a ref. He just, counted. And, he looked confused there. So Lio Rush ended up winning the match because Lashley ended up beating down on Elias. And Lio Rush ended up getting Elias's guitar. And, he tossed in Elias's guitar, Lio, to Lashley. Lashley then ended up hitting the guitar to Elias's back. And Lashley pretty much ended up telling Slater, to count Lio and make him win the match. And so that's basically what happened. And so after that, Heath Slater and Baron Corbin were backstage. Corbin says to Slater, he did a good job out there. And Slater tells Corbin, oh, I'm leaving. I'm going home. And Corbin ends up telling him he's not going home because he's got another match to referee in tonight. So that was that. Then we had Alexa Bliss come out for the Nia Jax Ronda Rousey face-to-face confrontation. Nia Jax and Tamina end up coming out. And Nia says she's going to make a statement. And she says this Sunday she is going to be the Raw Women's Champion at the direct expense of Ronda. And Nia says she realizes Ronda comes from a world that talks trash to hype a fight. And Nia says, she doesn't talk trash, and she's Ronda's worst nightmare. And she's the embodiment of the anti-Rousey. She goes to mention her secret is her hand and fist that broke Becky's face. And she says Sunday when the bell rings, when Ronda comes at her, she's going to punch her in the face. And she's going to punch her over and over and over and over until Ronda taps out to stop her. So Ronda ends up coming out and says she came here to fight. And Ronda gets in the ring. Nia and Tamina retreat out of the ring. And we see both Nia and Tamina, they're trying to surround Ronda. But Ember Moon comes out for the help. And that's how the segment ended. But terrible segment. my opinion. It was absolutely fucking terrible. Then we had Ember Moon versus Tamina. This was a who gives a shit match. You know, Ember Moon deserves better. And there were points in the match where Nia was trying to interfere, but Ronda ended up coming over there to take out Nia, which she did towards the end of the match. She ended up tossing Nia over the barricade, and so Ember Moon ended up getting the win. Ended up hitting the Eclipse to Tamina, and that was that. Boring match. This was a who gave a shit match. You know, who gives a shit? Then we had Charlie Caruso interviewing Baron Corbin, saying if the TLC match with Seth is a little abusive power. And Corbin says it's not an abuse of power. And he accepted Seth's challenge. And if he didn't accept it, they would have deprived seeing a TLC match. And Corbin says Strowman is a one-armed man because of him. And it's just a taste for Seth. And he'll experience much more when he becomes permanent general manager on Sunday. So that was the interview with Corbin. And then it was the main event. Seth Rollins versus Baron Corbin, TLC match for the Intercontinental Championship. This was a decent match, but was kind of very, also in a way kind of very lackluster, in my opinion. Seth Rollins was awesome in the match. The crowd was behind him, and the crowd was popping for him. This was the other match that Heath Slater was refereeing, and Heath Slater ended up pushing Seth Rollins off the ladder, and pretty much right there, Heath Slater turned heel. He tried to help Baron Corbin, and Seth Rollins ended up coming back, ended up taking down Heath Slater and Baron Corbin, and Seth Rollins ended up putting Baron Corbin through the table, ended up kicking Heath Slater, and so Seth Rollins ended up climbing the ladder, retrieving the Intercontinental Championship. So Seth Rollins ends up winning the match. We all knew Seth was going to win the match because there's no way that they're going to change the TLC card, and give someone else to fight Dean Ambrose. So after the match, Dean Ambrose ended up coming out, ended up looking at Seth, and that's how Raw ended. But it was a decent TLC match, but it was, in a way, kind of lackluster, in my opinion. It was a lackluster match. So anyways, that's it for this Raw review. Sorry there were so many there were interruptions here, but I hope you all enjoyed this review, and thank you all for watching, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and until the next video, I'll see you all later.